All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm making sure my stream has started on here. All right. Again, good afternoon. Um, I'm going to be giving you lecture number 2 of A Streetcar Named Desire today from scene, I believe we stopped at scene 5. From scene 5 on. I'm hoping you all are doing the reading. Hoping you guys don't object too terribly to the readings. I did pick these two. Why I picked 2 plays, I really don't know. I picked The Importance of Being Earnest because I think that's just something pretty much everybody in an intro to lit class should read. But Tennessee Williams, I think I gave you guys because I wanted to make sure I did something American lit with you, just because my background is British lit, and also because Dr. Wong, now I know that at least Dr. Singh did teach you guys the Glass Menagerie. Again, everybody teaches things differently. I don't know how, I don't know how he taught it to you. I don't know how long he spent teaching it. I don't know what he covered. But what I do hope is that at the end of the day, what you're maybe able to see with what he did and what I'm doing, teaching a streetcar, is some kind of overlap between Tennessee Williams' works. Because I think that while we don't necessarily always want to look at an author's work and treat it like everything that writer does is going to kind of look the same or be about the same thing, or, be kind of, monochromatic is the word I use. If that's a, $1 million word, all it means is a single color, sort of, a single view. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I think that if I had my way with teaching you guys, had I been teaching this class, for example, the second half of the class, I could have taught whatever I wanted. If I had gone ahead and decided, okay, I'm going to teach you A Streetcar Named Desire, even though we already read The Glass Menagerie, my hope would be that you walked away at least with a better understanding maybe of what Tennessee Williams did as a playwright. And my bigger hope would be that you liked the work. That's always my biggest, and I know that I can never, was it Abraham Lincoln who said, you can please some of the people all the time, or all the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. I've been teaching for 17 years. I know that I can't give assignments, or readings that everybody's going to love. If I could, I would. But I always try to think about, for example, when I was in college and the things I read that I actually, thought, that's not bad, or, oh, I like that. And I kind of try to stick to those. Whereas the things where I was a little bit more like, ugh, I try to stay away from, because I know that even if I like them now as a 40-year-old man, you guys aren't 40. Okay. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a background spiel as to kind of why I brought the works to the table that I did. Dr. Wong is going to bring an entirely different type of, a dynamic of works to the table than I did. So whatever I've done here, I hope it helped. I hope that, you got something out of these lectures. It's not necessarily easy to sit here for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, sometimes a little bit more, and monologue about a work without having any input. But at the same time, my hope is that it helped you in some way, especially if you were reading the work. My hope is that it would help you understand things maybe a little better, or look at them a little differently than maybe you would if you were just reading the work on your own and maybe not having an easy time with it. Pardon me. Again, I don't think either one of these works are particularly difficult to read, but they do have themes in them that, are complex. So that's kind of why I'm doing the lectures for you. So I hope they help. And I hope that when it's said and done, if we ever get back to having a normal on ground experience of learning. I hope that if any of you all are English minors, which I know some people that take 201 are, or people that just are looking to take an English course, or are English majors, I hope that, something I did here would make you go, hey, that guy's class, maybe not too bad. Maybe I'll give him a try. That's always good. The other day, I actually noticed I had a couple thumbs up on lectures I had given. So I hope that's, that's sincere. And I hope legitimately I'm doing the best I can. I think we all are, but I'm doing the best I can here. I had literally no notice in taking on this class. I was given notice probably about the 20, I'm going to say probably about the 20th of March, something like that. I was given notice that I was going to teach this class. So I think that all things considered, being that it was kind of the last minute, had to be thrown together, I think it's gone okay. I mean, I think it's gone better than I thought it would. And we're all having to deal with, the same kind of challenges. So for those of you who've been, doing the work and sticking with it and doing the assignments, I appreciate you. I'm doing the best I can, same as you all are. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the second half of A Streetcar Named Desire. So I just had basically what I did, as you can see, it's not a lot. I have basically one page of notes here in front of me. That's all I have. Basically, I just wanted to hit on some of the key points that I found throughout this second half of the work. It has been a long time since I've read this. So the one thing I always make sure I tell students is, especially with works I haven't read in a long time, I'm reading this right along with you. This isn't something I have committed to memory. These are not old notes. These are notes I took while I was reading this. So please don't think that, well, you don't have to do any work. You've already read this. Man, I bet you I haven't read this in at least 10 years. I mean, at least. I just haven't had a reason to. It's been a minute since I read it. So, the second half of the play, obviously, if you were reading it closely, and I might say kind of reading between the lines, it's disturbing. What ends up happening is pretty disturbing. So just some of the things that, I took notes on that I thought were at least worthy of addressing was, toward the beginning of what I read, I noted that, and again, I'll be looking over here because my laptop over here is where I had the play pulled up. Let me see here. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't even understand my own note. There was a part in here early on where Blanche is actually like making up stories about Stella's life, like she's writing to somebody, and she's actually like painting a picture of Stella's life as being this like great thing where the people she hangs out with are all sophisticated, like educated, really erudite and like interesting people. And she doesn't think that. I mean, she doesn't think that. She thinks Stanley is like dirt. She thinks Stanley's as common as dirt. She thinks most of the people there are like common as dirt, except for Mitch. And the thing about Mitch is that, their relationship is so kind of weird that it's hard to figure out exactly what it is about Mitch that she likes or doesn't like. because it doesn't seem like, at least by the end of the play or toward the end, it doesn't even seem like they would have been a good fit at all. Dating or other, maybe even. And I think the other thing we're probably also supposed to think here about also is this. If you remember the last lecture, I talked about Tennessee Williams' real life. And I also kind of brought in the Glass Menagerie with the character of Laura, and how most people who have done any biographical work or extensive work on Tennessee Williams' life and how it factored into what he wrote, they believe that Laura Wingfield is representative of Tennessee Williams' sister in real life. Well, one might also make the same case in this play about Blanche, because by the time you finish the play, it should be kind of obvious to you that Blanche is, for lack of a better term, she's gone nuts. Her behavior is not decent, and just her basic, view of things is very twisted. And I would say again, that's probably a case of, art imitating life. I gave you Oscar Wilde, to read before this. And I think in the back of my mind, one of the things I was also thinking about when I did that was the idea about appearances and how important they are in people's lives. Isn't it strange, or isn't it ironic that even though Blanche seems to have such a disdain for this cast of characters that surround her sister and her sister's husband, but yet she seeks out their approval? Isn't that strange? If you think somebody is common as dirt, why would you care what they thought about you? Again, it's that idea that, we're constantly putting on some kind of presentation. We're constantly putting on some kind of act for people. Okay. I'll tell you the truth. There are times where I'm on the job where I have to act. If your boss tells you something you don't want to hear or asks you to do something you don't want to do, most of the time you just don't have the carte blanche to tell them, I'm not doing that. You hear it and you know that you have to do it, and you just suck it up and go, all right. And you go on and do it. In a manner of speaking, although believe me when I tell you, I like teaching in the first place, but I like teaching 201. It's one of my favorite classes to teach. But I was not overly thrilled when my boss told me, 3 or 4 days ahead of time, I was going to have to take on this class and teach it for half of the second term. I was not blown away by that because I already have 4 classes that I had to teach, and 2 of them I had to convert to online classes. So basically, to me, that was just another piece of workload for me. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, I have a boss. My boss tells me what to do. I have a job to do. It's my job to do that. Okay. If I don't want to do the job, I guess I could go to the boss and say, no, I'm not doing that. And if they decide they want to fire me, and I'm willing to accept that consequence, then I guess that's fine. But my point is for the most part, basically all of us, unless you own a company or you are a supervisor of some sort, almost all of us are just foot soldiers. We do what we're told to do. And I think a lot of times, like, for example, in this case, mine, students don't always realize, like, teachers are not really very high up in the chain of command. I've been getting a lot of emails from students who are, asking me questions I can't answer. What assignments are you going to be willing to take, and what ones are you not going to be willing to take, and how can I do this and how can I do that? And what you have to understand is, like, it's very hard for me, particularly, like with this class, for example, to jump in the middle of something where I don't even know what you guys have done. I I didn't even have a roll book to look at until yesterday for your class. So what I mean is I could have been communicating with people in your class who have never come to class. I wouldn't know that. That's my point. Like, so in other words, again, those are just things where you have to deal with it. It is what it is. Okay. And how that brings us back to the play is, like, for example, again, being an English teacher, which is what Blanche is in the play. She also talks about keeping a notebook of phrases. And it's not meant to be complimentary. It's meant to be very patronizing. Like, almost like the people that she's around are like a novelty. And so she thinks, oh, well, this is cute. I'll stick this phrase in here that these people say. Oh, this is kind of neat. I'll stick this in here. It would be like me going and hanging around a bunch of my students and writing down the things they say that I'm not familiar with and keeping a little notebook of that, and then going and trying to talk that way so that I can look cool. Okay. It's sort of the same way. Like, people would be able to see through that pretty quickly, I think. Okay. Again, same thing here. That idea about appearances. They're really important in not just all of our lives, but in the works that I've had you read here. I would say they're made out to be even, they're of an exaggerated importance. And I would say the other thing that you get too, at least in A Streetcar Named Desire, and this is why, here's a literary term for you, the literary term foil. A foil is somebody who is kind of like an opposite of a person. Somebody who is kind of like, I don't necessarily want to say like an enemy, but like somebody's foil is sort of like they're kind of like a juxtaposed sort of character. I would say that, Stanley is almost completely opposite in that he almost doesn't seem like he cares at all about what anybody thinks about him. I mean, there's the part in this section of the play that you read where he is eating. He's described as eating, and I imagined what he was eating was something akin to like ribs. Okay, like, let's be honest. Unless you're my wife, most people don't eat ribs with a knife and fork. Okay, yes, my wife. That's my point. My wife does. Oddball. Most people eat ribs with their hands. And my point is, like, especially if you're eating ribs and they have sauce on them or something, you can hardly eat ribs without making a mess. That's why they give you like a bib when you eat them, and they give you like a wet nap. That's why they do that, because they know most people, again, with the exception of my wife, eat ribs with their hands. Well, there was a part in there that's described where, and I'm thinking that's what he's eating. Either that or it's like pork chops, but they're probably on a bone and he's eating it with his hands. And it says he's got grease on his hands and grease all over his face. And it almost seems like he just doesn't care. Like, he's just looking like nasty, like just greasy, just a mess. And he's just straight up just, eating those ribs, eating the pork, just doesn't care. Doesn't care. The only thing I ever get a vibe about Stanley caring about is, as far as appearances, is that his sort of position as the king of the castle is upheld. He even uses that phrase in there. Every man is like the king of his own house, or the ruler of his own house. And what that means is you have power over what goes on in that house. And I think I talked about that last lecture, that idea that, when you bring home the money, other people don't have a whole lot of say about what you do. I remember one time back in the day, just a kind of a sidebar, like a parallel. Back when I was partying a lot, I was dating a girl who was very affected. And what I mean by affected was she played a role. Her role was that she was this very genteel Southern girl. Okay. Got pretty tired pretty quick. Because especially if any of you have had me as a teacher before, you realize like I'm not big on putting on acts about things. I kind of just am what I am. And as I recall, like it was my birthday, I had a mess of people over. We were partying, doing what college kids do. And it was in my apartment. And she kind of took me to the side and told me that I was being too loud and that I needed to be quiet. I needed to be quieter. And my comment to her was, well, you know, it's my house. If you're not comfortable with the level of volume, there's the door. And I was polite enough about it, but that was basically what I said. And she got in a big huff and left. And I thought, that's fine. Because, you know, I was being too loud in my own house. I thought, wow, that's a lot of nerve to tell somebody how to act in their own house. And I think that's part of what again, I'm not defending Stanley's character. He's he is trying to think of a nice word for it. He's boorish. That would be a word for it. A boar is a wild pig. He is very boorish. And there's no denying that. And there's definitely no defending something he does that I will explain later, because you may not have gotten this from it. And there's definitely no defending that. But where I'm going with it is, I think the only thing he cares about in the sense of appearances is that he's treated as the head of house. In other words, like when Blanche, for example, comes in and drinks his liquor, I don't think it's so much that I don't think it's so much like that she's drinking his liquor, like he's an alcoholic and her drinking his liquor bothers him because she's drinking his liquor. I think his issue with it is almost sort of like how most of us would be, where it's that he's never asked, you know, like she never asks, can I have it? Or, you know, do you have any liquor around that I could have a glass of? She just sort of takes it, or she sort of assumes that, you know, it's going to be given her. And it's like most of us, you know, like if I'm sitting at my, you know, let's say I've seen this has happened. I'll give you all an example. So in Trustee, in the hall that my office is in. Sorry, I've been really thirsty. I think it's a pollen because my windows are open. We pay building dues. The people who are in that office, we pay building dues. I think there's about 12 people who have offices in Trustee, and we pay like $10 a semester each. So that's like $120. And what that's supposed to go for is like, you know, amenities, like things like, you know, sprays for the bathroom, soap, you know, just in case the custodians don't put soap in there. You know, just amenities. And then like once or twice a semester, Dr. Ratliff will order pizzas and we'll have like a little luncheon in the basement in Trustee. Okay. Now what you have to understand is, again, we're paying for that. Like, I mean, that comes out of money we've paid. Okay. Claflin's not paying for it. You know, that's money we've all paid. So what that means is like, I'm entitled to some of that pizza. I paid my building dues. There have been times where we've been in there and we've been in the middle of having one of those luncheons, and a student will walk in, a student will just walk up and take a piece of pizza. Okay. Now don't get me wrong. Here's the thing. I'm not going to eat anybody's lunch. What I mean is I'm not going to chew somebody out over that. It's not worth it to me. I don't care that much. But at the same time, would it not behoove you, or would it not be easy for you to just ask the 4 or 5 people you know are faculty members who are sitting there with 2 open boxes of pizza in front of them, is it okay if I have a piece? But people straight up mob in there and they just take it and just walk out like it's a pizza party. The point is I mean, they didn't pay for it. It's like the movie Friday. Smokey goes, "You didn't put it on this, man." Well, I mean, you didn't pay for the pizza, so you shouldn't assume that you're entitled to a piece of it. Okay? By the same token, there have been many times where I had to teach when they had these luncheons and I didn't get any pizza. Well, you know what? That's just tough on me. I couldn't make it there before the pizza got eaten. I don't go up and complain about it. It is what it is. I had to teach when they had the pizza there. Okay. I'm sure if I had gone up to Dr. Khan or Dr. Ratliff and said, "Hey, listen, I can't teach then. Can you save me a piece or two?" I'm sure they would have. But you know what? It's not that big of a deal to me. That's the point I'm making, is again, where like I have enough respect for them as colleagues that if they're going to eat all the pizza because they're hungry, let them eat it. Okay. I mean, I don't care that much, but I also would not go over to JST where the biology people are. And if they're in there eating pizzas, I would not walk in there as an English teacher, go up and snatch a piece and walk out, because I would realize that's probably something that is being done for the people who are teaching, chemistry, biology, geology, whatever the science, if that's in the science building. I don't teach science, so I wouldn't presume that. Now, if I was hungry, I may walk in there and say, "Hey, I wasn't able to get a piece of pizza at my own department function. Do you guys care if I have a slice?" I don't think they would care. And that's where I'm going with Stanley. I don't think he cares that much that Blanche drinks his liquor. I think he gets upset that she just assumes that's fine with him. And that's not respecting people's boundaries. You have to respect people's boundaries. And a lot of times, like, I'm one of those people where, like, literally, especially if I'm like a good friend of yours, I'll give you the shirt off my back, but you shouldn't expect it. That's my point. You shouldn't just expect that. You would have to come to me and say, "Listen, man, I'm going through a rough time. I need your help." You'd get it, but you shouldn't expect me to come up to you and give it to you unless you tell me you need it. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's one thing that we can actually speak for, maybe in Stanley's defense, is that maybe in his eyes, Blanche is kind of an interloper who comes in, and any respect he felt like he had earned or established, he feels like is not being given to him by her. And that also involves his stuff. Another one of the things is when she's drinking, it also put me in mind of a joke a friend of mine told me back in the day. I had a friend who, he probably still is, but he was a very heavy drinker. And when I went to England to visit him, English people, they have a pub culture, kind of like these guys don't have a pub culture. They do have a drinking culture, but they don't have a pub culture. In England, what a pub culture, all that means is, like, after work, people go to the pub and they have a beer. It doesn't mean like they just get drunk all the time. It just means like that's where they meet. Like socially, they go meet and they have a beer. That's just how people are in England. Well, he was a really heavy drinker. And I remember when I went over and I visited him in England, one day, I guess he was a little squirrely the next day after he had too much to drink. And we were just eating, we were eating lunch, and he ordered a Coke, and he was drinking a Coke, and he looked at me and he goes, "Man," he goes, "I forgot what Coke tastes like without rum in it." And it just reminded me of Blanche in the play, where it's almost like she's such a, I don't want to say a drunk, but let's put it this way. Like, she likes to drink. It's almost like every time she's drinking a soda, she needs to put liquor in it. Like if you notice, every time she's drinking a soda, especially if someone offers her liquor, she's like, "Well, hey, soda's good, but liquor makes soda even better." It's sort of like, again, and I'm not advocating anything. It just puts me in the mind of, I don't know how many of y'all have seen the movie Half Baked with Dave Chappelle in it, old movie. But there's the part where the guy who's the pothead, he goes, have you ever seen the movie Son of a Woman? And and Dave Chappelle's character is like, yeah. And the guy goes, have you ever seen it on weed? And Dave Chappelle's just looking at it, and the guy's like, it's 10 times better. And Chappelle's like, all right. And the guy's like, have you ever seen the movie Scarface? and Chappelle's like, yeah. And the guy goes, you ever seen it on weed? And the Chappelle's like, mm-hmm. You guys like, it's 10 times better. And like I said, I'm not advocating anything. I do not want you thinking that's what I'm doing. It reminded me of that, where it's almost like, anything that can be just mildly enjoyable for Blanche, it's almost like she needs alcohol to enjoy it fully. Sort of like that character in Half Baked. He needs pot to enjoy everything the way he thinks it needs to be fully enjoyed. Again, I do not want you thinking I'm advocating anything. I'm not advocating alcohol either. This play does, at least for some people. But at any rate, one of the other things I think is important about teaching a play, for a very long time, probably up until the late 1700s, there was an idea that in order to gain anything from a play, you had to watch it. Because you got to remember, plays are designed to be seen. Like books are designed to be read. Plays are designed to be seen. It wasn't until probably like the late 1700s, I think Samuel Johnson was the one who said that, you can gain something from reading a play too. But for a long time, like people didn't read Shakespeare's plays. They went and saw them performed. They didn't read them. We read them now because for the most part, one, unless you're like in New York, on Broadway or something, it's kind of hard to go find people who are performing plays. And it's really hard to find them performed well and performed with any regularity. Usually, I mean, they're not movies. Our movies replace plays in our culture. But the point I'm getting at is if you read The Glass Menagerie, if you read A Streetcar Named Desire, what you see in these plays is a lot of what we would call stage direction. Stage direction is typically stuff that's like italicized or in brackets, and it's not dialogue. And the stage direction is supposed to give you as a reader an idea of like what's going on. Like, Stanley crosses the room and takes a bottle of liquor and pours a half a glass. That's a stage direction. It's telling you like what's going on. Okay. It's a descriptor. Okay. So one of the things you should notice about this particular play that would make it be drastically different if you saw it performed as opposed to you reading it is the part where they talk about the blue piano theme that plays. Like it would probably be some sort of sultry kind of piano music because, they're in New Orleans, which is a city that, is full of music. It has that French influence there, the Cajun music. And you'd hear, and it's a very sultry place. It's very humid. It's hot. It's sticky there. It would be very like sultry kind of music. And I know that's about the best word I can come up with to describe it. But it would add a certain mood to a scene that unfortunately you just reading it, you can't get. You'd have to hear it. Okay. But there's a reason why that music comes in when it does. Go back and look where it comes in and see what goes on when they talk about that blue piano playing. Okay. One of the other things that's funny too about the parody I gave you to watch, I gave you a Simpsons episode to watch, and in it, Marge is playing Blanche, and there's a part where Marge is getting the newspaper delivered to her, and she kisses the delivery boy, which is in the play. I mean, it's in the actual play. But what's funny is that in The Simpsons, Apu, he is like an Indian character, like not Native American, but like from the country of India. And what's funny is in this play, I think one of the things you're also supposed to get a sense of, even though they're not developed. They're not developed characters at all. But I think one of the things Tennessee Williams wants you to think about New Orleans too is that it's full of all these different cultures of people. You've got like Pablo, you can tell by the name. He's one of the characters. He's obviously Hispanic. Now, I don't know that they said, Mexican specifically, but there's the woman who's selling flowers on the sidewalk that they say Mexican lady. Okay. We know that Stanley's Polish, not a Polak, remember, and I was right in my first lecture. I told you I was reading along with you. Stanley is American of Polish descent. Okay. Again, remember this too. Polak is a derogatory term. Polish, okay, is not, or a Pole, okay, is a proper term. Polak is a derogatory term for a Polish person. That's not what you shouldn't go around calling them that. Okay. You've got the newspaper delivery boy, who I think we're supposed to assume is Middle Eastern, because what Blanche tells him is, you look like such and such a character from the Arabian Nights. And the Arabian Nights is a story that takes place in the Middle East. And so I think it's funny that in the parody I gave you in The Simpsons, Apu actually fits the description of what Tennessee Williams newspaper delivery boy probably would have kind of looked like, or at least ethnically speaking. Apu obviously like a grown man in the show. But what I mean is, it's just funny that ended up happening in The Simpsons, because I didn't remember when I was back watching the parody. I didn't remember that the character in the play was actually described as being like, Middle Eastern. One of the other things too that I took a note on here. Blanche uses the word gentleman. I think, again, that's an important word to think about, for us to think about, because, gentleman has a lot of cultural connotations too. Like in The Importance of Being Earnest, the idea of a gentleman was defined by somebody's, if you remember, like Lady Bracknell, when she's grilling Jack Worthing, she asks him, do you smoke? Because a man should smoke. What side of the street do you live on? Where do you live? What is your job? How much money do you make? Do you know everything or do you know nothing? What I'm getting at is, she was an old school English lady, and she had all these ideas in her head of what a gentleman should be. And so she's throwing them all out at this poor guy at one time, and he's got to answer all these questions to try to prove that he's a gentleman. And, with different eras come different definitions. With different cultures come different definitions of what a gentleman is. And what I would say in this case, Blanche is saying is, in the South, where she's from, gentlemen are supposed to behave a certain way. And what she's saying is that Mitch has started acting kind of rude toward her, or maybe a little bit like, well, he picks her up. And I think he's more just like awkwardly flirting with her, but she kind of takes offense at it. I don't know. That's kind of how I read it. And she's like, just because we're out on a date doesn't mean that you don't still need to act like a gentleman with me. And, again, I think it's just one of those things where, that sort of perception, I think, is important, because we do need to understand that Blanche has a certain perception of what like an aristocrat or a gentleman would be. And because we know Stanley is neither of those things, she already has a bad opinion of him before she ever really has any reason to form one. Another thing I noticed too was on page 100, and I try not to beat my students to death with literary terms, as I've told you, but there's foreshadowing on page 100 where Blanche actually says at the top of the page, and again, I'm looking at my version. I assume this is the one you guys are looking at. He hates me, or why would he insult me? The first time I laid eyes on him, I thought to myself, that man is my executioner. That man will destroy me unless, and then she's stopped. I mean, if you read the whole play, you know that 50, at least in this version, 54 pages later, that comes to happen. So, and again, that's 2/3 of the way through the play. She basically says, yep, the first time I laid eyes on this guy, I knew that this guy was going to be the one who takes me down. And he takes her down basically in every way possible. I mean, he destroys her reputation. He destroys her name, destroys her reputation. Destroys her credibility, and ultimately has her, I guess I go ahead and give away the ending. We get the impression she gets carted off to a mental hospital somewhere. That's kind of and again, that goes back to Tennessee Williams' own life. Of course, there's one other thing that he does too that I'm tiptoeing around because we haven't gotten there yet. I also have on my notes the end of Act 6. Let's see. Something happens here. Or scene 6. I'm sorry. Sometimes I will say act. What I mean is scene. Scene 6. Yeah, she said it's very odd the way that scene ends. She's telling a story and then she goes, sometimes there's God, so quickly. And then the scene ends. Very strange placement there to bring in religious stuff and then not go anywhere with it. It's almost like maybe she's having this moment of this epiphany or this moment of divine intervention, and then it's just snuffed out. Or maybe it really never happened. You understand what I mean? Like maybe it's not really that. It may be just she's full of crap. I don't know. It's interesting that it's placed there. And there's not much religion in this story. I mean, one of the things I tell all my English students, those of you, again, I think there are some of you in this class may have had me before. One of the things I always tell my students is, if you're ever in a literature class and a teacher asks you what a book is about, there's basically 3 safe answers: either love, God, or death. Those are your 3 safe answers. Okay. So you got them right here from Dr. Root. I just gave them to you. Those are your safe answers. And one of the things about this play is this play's definitely got love in it. It's got a metaphorical death in it, but it doesn't have much to do with religion. I mean, there's not much religion in this play, which is why that stood out to me. Okay. Again, make of it what you want to. I just thought I would bring it up. Again, later on, like page 108, one of the things we hear about, and then we find out apparently it was true, is that Blanche is, I hate using this word. It sounds like Blanche is a pedophile. or at the very least has very poor judgment in involving herself in romantic relationships with people who are not of a consenting age. Okay. Now, the reason I wanted to say it that way is this. I think quite rightly in our world, when we hear the term pedophile, what we think of is like an adult who targets like children. Okay. Well, she had some sort of inappropriate relationship with a student, but it's not like the student was like a little kid. The student was apparently like 17, which means like it's sort of again like Oscar Wilde in his real life, where I think, you know, the word pedophile maybe gets thrown around, and we have a different association with that word than maybe people did even 50, 75 years ago. Whereas now when we hear it, we think of, you know, somebody who's going like, you know, like To Catch a Predator, if you've ever seen that show, where some guy is online and he's back typing, you know, from behind a screen to kids, and then he's setting up a way to go meet these kids or whatever. I think that's more what we think of when we think of a pedophile. But what you have to understand is the law doesn't, you know, the law doesn't discriminate in that way. What I mean is like, yeah, we're going to look at that and think like, okay, it's way worse for a person to, you know, go after, you know, really, really young people than it is for someone to go after someone who's, you know, 14 or 15. Well, what I'm getting at is this. It is. To us, yeah, it probably is. But what I'm saying is to the law, it's the same thing. What I'm getting at is like, it's sort of like, you know, if you get pulled over for going 45 and a 40, okay, and another guy gets pulled over for going 59 and a 40, well, guess what? Neither one of you are going to get charged with reckless driving. One guy might have to pay more, but what I mean is, you know, it's still a speeding ticket. You're still going to get points on your license. What I'm saying is to the law, it's basically the same thing, unless you hit a certain point. And what I'm saying is, you know, to the law, at least as I know it, for the most part, you know, unless somebody is of the age of consent, you're considered a sex offender if you're going after somebody that is younger than that age. And so apparently Blanche gets painted with the brush of, you know, being this kind of person, even though, you know, we don't really know the details of it. And I don't think we're supposed to. I don't think Tennessee Williams wants us to know the details of it. And I think that all we're supposed to be thinking of is this. Blanche's descent into going crazy had already started. And that was just one of the early, you know, sort of warning signs that like, okay, this lady's lost it. Like, she does not have a very good judgment. Like, to be honest with you, I have known people who teach at the university level, no one at Claflin, just for the record, no one at Claflin. I have known people who have taught at the university level who have dated their students. Okay. Now, big difference. Their students were over 18. But my point is that's still a bad idea. Okay. Where I'm going with this is, even with Blanche, she might go, well, you know, the kid was 17 years old. I mean, you know, why is that bad? Well, I mean, even if, let's say, the age of consent was 16, which I think actually now it is. Again, laws change. My point is it's still not a good idea to date your students. Okay. I mean, it's just not a good idea. It can lead to all kinds of problems. And in fact, you still hear about that on the news from time to time. You will still hear about that. You know, a teacher having an inappropriate relationship with a student. And nowadays they absolutely nail those people now too. I mean, they go to jail. Like almost always they go to jail. I won't get into the one case. I'll give you a name. Mary Kay Letourneau did it more than once with the same student. Like what I mean was she got caught more than once having, you know, like inappropriate contact. I don't mean necessarily like she got caught doing the bad thing with him. What I mean was they found out she was having a relationship with him. She went to court. They gave her like a court order and told her, you're not to have any contact with this kid. And she went and did it anyway. So she got busted again because the cops caught her. So yeah, I mean, you can look that up. That's a well-known story. And actually, I think she ended up with that kid. I think they ended up getting married. But like, there's a huge gap in their ages. I mean, it's probably like 20 years or more. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it was just a crazy story. But anyway, my point is, like, it's not socially accepted. Okay. Okay. So I'm getting close to the end of the lecture here. This is where I want to go with this. Just a few things. Okay. Page 127, Blanche says, I don't want realism. I want magic. And I tell what ought to be the truth. Well, again, I think one of the things that you might be seeing is there was maybe a little method to my madness, giving you Oscar Wilde and giving you Tennessee Williams. Yeah, they were writing in a little different time period, and one was Irish, one was American, but they were both homosexual writers. Well, Wilde probably technically could be considered bisexual, but both of them, you know, had relationships with the same sex. And both of them wrote works that had a lot to do with people's appearances, the way people sort of viewed things, wanted to be viewed, and created things maybe that weren't there. They wanted to create themselves into some sort of image of something that wasn't really there. And I think that's something Blanche is trying to do in New Orleans. She just doesn't have any way to go about doing it. It's almost like, I'm in a new place. I can reinvent myself here. I can recreate myself. But the problem is, you know, she has so much baggage, and Stanley, we know from the beginning, he's not going to let her do that. He's not going to let her get away with what she, you know, with what she literally in the trunk is dragging around with her. He's the trunk. That's a metaphor too. Again, I mean, literally what you have to do with the trunk is drag it behind you. Well, that trunk is full of all her faded Southern memories. And she's having to drag that trunk behind her. She's dragging around basically those skeletons with her. She's never going to get rid of them, and Stanley's not going to let her get rid of them. So from the beginning, we know he's on a mission to make sure she's outed. He's going to out her. He's going to make sure everyone knows she's a fraud. And let's be honest, whether you feel sorry for her or not, that's what she is. Okay? Sorry, guys, if you read this and you felt really bad for her, you know, that's understandable, but she's a fraud. Okay? She's a fake. And there's a backstory she obviously doesn't want out there. Would you? Would you want that backstory out there? No, that's why she keeps it a secret. That's why she's trying to recreate herself or make herself into something she's not. We call it putting on airs. Like whenever she makes up the story about the guy who sent her the wire, okay, a telegram, the millionaire from Texas, that's made up. That didn't happen. Okay, like if you read that and thought, oh, things are going to work out for Blanche, this millionaire sent her this wire and she's going to go be with him. That's made up. She's putting on airs. She's trying to make herself out to be something more than she is. Okay, it's fake. She doesn't have anything. She's a washed up Southern belle. That's the way to describe it. She's kind of like Amanda Wingfield in The Glass Menagerie. She's a dried up, washed up Southern belle with nothing but her memories. That's all she's got. She don't have no money. She wouldn't be there if she did. She don't have anything of any value. She wouldn't be there if she did. All she's got are memories. And I think a quote like that, I don't want realism, I want magic, I think leads us also to ask, you know, how many of those memories are even true? Because even Stella at some points is like, yeah, the stuff she's slinging is not accurate. Okay. 3 more points I want to make, and then I'll be done. I should be able to get it done within the hour, the 1 hour mark here. On page 137, she talks about I've been in New Orleans. I've been casting my pearls before the swine. Okay. That's a biblical verse. The verse that the book it comes from, I can look it up real quick. Just for my own edification and for yours. Matthew 7:6. Matthew is one of my favorite books in the Bible. Chapter 6 is probably one of my favorite books in the Bible. Just really quickly to look at what that means on here. To cast pearls before the swine. If you say you're casting pearls before the swine, you mean you're wasting your time by offering something helpful or valuable to someone who doesn't even get it. Okay. Basically, it's a very, very arrogant way to look at yourself. To think that you're so important and so great and so important that the things that you say are such jewels like pearls that it would be like putting pearls out in front of a pig. What would a pig know what would a pig know what to do with pearls? That's the point of that. Okay. Again, like think about if your teachers had that attitude. I mean, no one would ever learn anything. You understand what I mean? Like no one would ever learn anything if a teacher felt like, well, I'm just casting my pearls before the swine. Just think about that. Like no one would ever learn anything. No one would ever improve any if people had that attitude. The play ends with her saying, well, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers. And again, I don't know if that's supposed to be an ironic ending because, like Stanley really and her were pretty much strangers. And because he wasn't kind to her, it kind of destroyed her life. I don't know if what we're supposed to maybe have is an optimistic hope that, she's going to go to this mental hospital and that they're going to fix her up. I don't get that sense, but maybe some people do. I think, again, it's just more than anything telling you the kind of person she is where, she's always sort of counted on other people to kind of define her and not only define her, but to give her help just because helping her was the right thing to do. And what happened when she got around Stanley was she met somebody who she called her executioner, who didn't care about helping her and didn't care about it being the right thing to do. So the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So what happens on page 141 whenever Blanche breaks the bottle, and says she stabbed Stanley in the face with it. And he says, oh, you want to get rough. And then basically what's described is like they have a tussle. He grabs her by her wrists and, overpowers her. Well, I mean, again, I think it's easy to look at that. Again, if we were watching it, we'd know, but because we're reading it, it's very easy to think that maybe it's just Stanley, exerting his, sort of, we've talked about his beastly sort of, animalistic way of dealing with people. But I'm just going to come out and call it what it is. He rapes her. This is a rape scene. It's just done very, at least in the written play, it's just done very casually. And again, I'm not saying that Tennessee Williams is treating rape casually. What I'm saying is the way it's written out, it's not like he's describing every detail of what Stanley's doing either. Because again, remember, like if you were watching a play, you'd know this, you'd see it because he would be on top of her and you'd put 2 and 2 together, even if the scene. And I think what happens, if I remember correctly, Tennessee Williams plays were also very big on like the scene transitions. Glass Menagerie is a great example of it being a memory play and the stuff in the background and all that, I think what you probably would have seen, if I remember correctly, is you would have probably seen him forcing himself on top of her, and it would have slowly faded to black. And of course, again, that's all part of her point about him being her executioner, because that's sort of like the straw that breaks the camel's back. You know, she's already in a bad way, and that sort of, you know, closes the book on her. It's sad, but I would argue that, you know, Tennessee Williams does such a good job of making Blanche out to be kind of a jerk that to a lot of readers, it may not be for them as much of a sympathetic, you know, moment as it probably should be. Because rape is just not, is never something that should be overlooked or treated casually. It just isn't. But again, I don't think, here would be my theory, and this is where I'll wrap up, because again, what I'll state this outright. When I teach literature, I think I'm doing a better job if I leave us with more questions than I do with answers, because I think life is going to leave you with more questions than it is answers. I think literature is the same way. I don't have all the answers to this stuff, guys. I don't claim to. I don't claim to have all the answers to stuff I'm an expert on things I've read and taught and written on. I don't claim to have all the answers to those. I certainly don't have all the answers to this. But here is what I would say Williams was doing. One, writing in the era of modernity, which is talked about in the article that I put on Moodle and I talked about in the previous lecture. Writing in that era of modernity where people felt hopeless, they felt helpless, they were always in despair, just, you know, things were not good. What I would say is that by making Blanche into the character that she becomes, or the character she is, whatever you want to say, throughout the play, it was another layer of complexity that Williams was able to interweave into it to make his readers question how they felt about this. Because one of the things, you know, you have to remember about that whole idea of identity, perception, creating one's own image, things like that, is one of the things that a lot of us end up doing at the end of the day is we question ourselves. You know, we question like our actions. We question, did we, you know, some people, you know, before they go to bed, I know every night they ask, you know, did I do more good today than I did bad? When I was in this situation, if let's say they're saying a prayer, Lord, did I do things the way you would have had me do them? Another one is some people go to bed at night and go, Lord, I don't want to, but I'm going to pray for my enemies and pray for those people who persecute me. Because because I know that's what you would have me do. I'm going to pray for those people. And I think that for someone like Tennessee Williams, a homosexual man who I'm not sure was very open in that. Again, I don't know enough about him to know, you know, how open he was about it or how accepting maybe people around him were about it. But I wonder if maybe at the end of the day, if this is just me throwing something out there and seeing if it sticks. If we were going to treat homosexuality as something that people are born being, and maybe not something that people just become, maybe one of the things Tennessee Williams constantly grappled with was why. Why am I this way? why did, and again, I'm just throwing this out here. I'm not saying he's a religious guy. Why did God make me homosexual? What in my life, even if, let's say, he didn't look at it that way, what in my life caused me to be homosexual? And what I'm getting at is, I think at the end of the day, maybe a lot of what Williams tries to do with his writing is maybe reflective of what he did a lot of in his own life, which is asking questions of himself, much like he's trying to make a reader ask of themselves that they can't really answer. Like at the end of The Glass Menagerie, for example, do you feel bad for Tom, or do you like him? Because I think if you were to come out and tell me I like him, then I could just as easily come back and go, yeah, but how can you like a guy who abandons his family? But just as easily, if you go, well, I hate him, I could go, yeah, but how can you hate a guy who, is disrespected? He's maligned. He doesn't like his life. How can you blame him for leaving? You understand what I mean? There's these complexities here that at the end of the day, they're supposed to make you question yourself and your values, along with questioning why you have them, why you feel that way. So at the end of this play, you probably should look at Stanley Kowalski as being a rapist, not a good person, pretty much a bore, like I said before, a very boorish person. But at the same time, if you had to juxtapose Blanche and Stanley, is Stanley really that much worse than Blanche? I mean, I don't know. You could certainly make an argument that he is, but I think you could make just as strong of an argument that he isn't. And I think that's what this play wants you to do. I think that's what Williams wants you to do at the end of the day with this play. He wants you to look at the actions of these characters and not only question them, but question why you would have those values. Is the fact that Blanche is a complete, just annoying pest, does that mean she deserves her fate? No, probably not. But at the same time, was Stanley Kowalski trying to think of the right word to use here. Because there's no defending rape, and that's not the word I want to use. What I want to say is, was there something in the situation that caused him to lose it? And was Blanche part of what caused that to happen? Again, like I'm not saying it was. What I mean is, again, I think Williams wants readers to look at this, and I don't think he wants us to be able to answer the questions. I think he wants us to have questions. I don't think he wants us to be able to answer those. And I mean, what of Stella? What of the baby? At the end of the story, like, these are things that should be important, right? And yet they're almost like afterthoughts. We know that Stanley got away with what he did. We know that Blanche is going off to the nut house. And presumably, Stanley and Stella are going to go back to the way things were. For better or worse. And maybe that's a question to end on too. For better or worse. Or maybe we're supposed to think it's just a matter of time before Stanley does something violent to Stella. Because if he'll do it to one person, he'd do it to another, right? So that's where I'm going to leave things. I'm going to leave it with you all, asking your own questions and coming up with your own answers. Because Dr. Root, one, I don't want to give you the answers, and two, I don't have them. I know you're probably not used to hearing a teacher tell you that, but I don't have them. My job is to facilitate you guys thinking, not to tell you what to think. Okay. And on that note, I'm hoping that I was able to do that some. I enjoyed doing these lectures as much as I can, teaching online, which I'm not really a fan of. I'm doing the best. I did the best I could. Thank you all, those of you who watched. I look forward to reading what you hand in. I'm going to grade it as promptly as I can. And I'm sure Dr. Wong will take over and do the same. And if you guys have any particular questions about anything, just, shoot me an email and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. And I'll try to answer it as clearly as I can. All right. Thank you all. Be healthy, be happy, be safe. Look out for each other and look out for yourselves. Okay. See you.